Well, good day, and welcome once again to Moments with Dr. Steve. I'm Dr. Steve Bonenberger, and my life lately has been over the last several years what I call glory to glory. I get to deal with all kinds of really fun things, and one of the things I wanted to do before my days were over, and I hope they're not over for a long, long time, was to reconnect with one of the most profound and certainly impactful men that has ever entered my life. His name is Dr. Buddy Wagner. And in a minute, we're going to be going over his therapeutic hypnotic model. And he's an expert in this matter, a subject matter expert, but he was my principal professor at the college I went to. And I would say that there is no one that has had a more direct impact upon my healing work than this man. And I've been doing this work for 40 years throughout the decades. And it's just an honor to have you, Doc. And I'm just glad that you said yes when I asked you to come on our program and to talk about this matter that you have spent a great deal of your life figuring out and investing time and interest in, and then becoming a practitioner in the art of hypnotic therapeutic intervention. So welcome to our program again, sir.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, last time, Doc, we went over how you got into hypnosis, and you told a story about one of your own former students actually said he was going to go to some seminar, and then you said, hey, I'm going to go too. So that kind of got you going, and then from there you progressed along. But if you would just give us an overview of what you use and how you see the hypnotic interventive model as we start our conversation again, sir, please.
Okay. Well, most problems are unconscious problems. People don't consciously choose to have anxiety or depression or panic attacks or phobias. And so it makes sense that since they are unconscious problems, the best way to resolve them is with the unconscious mind. And that's exactly what hypnosis does. It kind of gets the conscious mind out of the way so that the unconscious becomes accessible. And then I can make suggestions to that person's unconscious mind that it can use to resolve whatever the issue might be. And so that's kind of for me at least, that's kind of it just makes sense to me that hypnosis is an effective way to resolve unconscious problems, more so than conscious talking about it. We can consciously talk about a problem all day long, but that doesn't mean it gets solved. But if we can get to the unconscious and resolve it at the unconscious level, it can be resolved rather quickly and rather effectively.
And so out of that belief that the way to properly address most emotional, I don't want to use the word disorders, but you use the word problem, was to then go directly to the source, which is the unconscious. And so you began working in this field of hypnotic intervention. And last time you gave us, and I think it would be important before we get into some of the details of this session, some of the kind of guided formulas and guided principles that you use, because the way you presented and framed that last time was really, really excellent. The first thing you said is that hypnosis is really, it's an act that has to be granted consensus, and there has to be this thing that has to come from the soul, where that the person that is the recipient of the treatment has to in fact say, okay, I give my consent, and they're aware of what is going on. Would you just kind of string that out a little bit, because I thought it was so well put the way you stated it in our last conversation?
Yeah, well, like any therapy, obviously it's a cooperation between the therapist and the client. And with hypnosis, first of all hypnosis is self-hypnosis. So I'm not hypnotizing the person. I'm leading them into hypnosis by my suggestions, but they're the one putting themselves into trance, not me. And they're in control always. They're not going to say or do anything that they don't want to say or do. They have control while they're in trance. Matter of fact, I would say they're more in control when they're in trance than they are when they're not in trance.
Wow.
because of the power of the unconscious mind. So it's a cooperative endeavor. And my job as a therapist is simply to make suggestions to the unconscious mind that it can use to resolve the problem. Now, I don't know what's best for the unconscious to use. So I'm going to give it, usually I give it a minimum of 5 different suggestions that it can choose from to resolve the issue. And then, assuming that the hypnosis is effective, the unconscious will resolve the problem. And many times it only takes 1 session. To me, that's another beauty of hypnosis. I never see anyone over 4 sessions, because if I don't help them in 4 sessions, I'm not going to help them. And so, that's my limit. But usually I don't get to 4. Usually they've resolved their issue with 1 or 2 sessions, sometimes 3, sometimes 4, but usually quicker than that. So it works effectively, it works fast. And I like that, because as I expressed before, part of what caused me to move in this direction was that I got tired of talking about the same problem over and over and over with a client, and us not getting anywhere with it. We didn't seem to be making any progress. And so this way, if I'm going to help them, I'm going to help them quickly.
Well, let's talk about exactly how you lead a person into a trance. His name's Dr. Buddy Wagner. I'm Dr. Steve Bonenberger. He's an expert in the matter of hypnotic intervention in the therapeutic experience and encounter. And of course, I have a toolbox of my own that I use, and I do a form of hypnotic intervention, but mine's a bit different than what Dr. Wagner's an expert in. So, Doctor, let's talk a little bit about how you orient the person to trance. And can you describe for us what the setting might be like? I think it would be important for folk to get their mind around what exactly happens, how the process begins, how it unfolds. I'm certainly interested in how you do this, sir, and I'd like to have you, if you would, kind of flesh that out a little bit for all of us.
Okay. Now, I mean, I don't know, the last 10 years or so, my reputation was such that most people who come to me come expecting for me to use hypnosis with them. I mean, that's how they know me as a hypnotherapist. But if someone comes and they're not aware of that they just come to see me as a therapist, then, and if I feel like hypnosis is the most effective tool to use with them, then I will say to them, I think hypnosis might be helpful to you. Do you know anything about hypnosis? Have you ever been hypnotized before? And of course, usually they'll say no. And I'll say, well, do you know anything about hypnosis? And they'll say, well, no, only what I've seen on TV, And so I say, well, if you've ever been to a show hypnotist, or if you've watched a show hypnotist on TV, it's real in the sense that the person really is hypnotized, but it's misleading in that it makes it look like the hypnotist has control over the person. Those show hypnotists, they might tell a person to quack like a duck or, whatever, and the person will do it. And so it makes it look like the hypnotist is in control. But in reality, those show hypnotists know how to choose people from the audience who want to act silly. And so those are the people they choose to come up on stage. The people really do go into trance, but when the hypnotist tells them to do these silly things, they do them, not because they don't have any control over it, but because they want to act silly. And so show hypnotists are misleading in that it makes it appear that they're in control of the person when in fact they're not in control at all. And so I want my client to understand that look, when you go into trance, you're still going to be in control. You're not going to say or do anything that you don't want to say or do. You have total control. And then I say, even though you said you hadn't been hypnotized before, you really have been in trance many times in your life. For example, you've probably gotten in your car and driven from point A to point B, but when you get to point B, you don't remember making the drive. You were in trance. Or watching TV, and all of a sudden you come to and realize you've been staring at the TV for 10 minutes, but you don't know what's going on in the show. You're in trance. So trance is a very natural phenomenon. It's an altered state of consciousness. It's not unconsciousness. You will be conscious. You will be aware throughout the session. You won't be unconscious. And so you will put yourself into trance, not me. I can't hypnotize you. You will do the hypnosis. And if you do what I ask you to do, you will go into trance, but it'll be you putting yourself into trance. And so I want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. And so do you have any questions about what's going to happen? And sometimes some of the common questions I get, one question I get is, well, if I go into trance, what if I can't come out? And my answer is, well, you don't have to worry about that. You may not come out when I suggest you come out, but you'll come out when your unconscious is ready to bring you out. But you will come out, I can assure you. And another question is, even though I've already told them, they might say, well, will I say or do anything that I don't want to say or do? And I say, no, you'll be in control. And I'm not going to ask you to say or do anything, but if I did and you didn't want to do it, you wouldn't do it because you're in control. And so I answer their questions. And then I say to them, what takes you into trance is focused attention. If you focus your attention on something long enough, you will naturally go into trance. Now that can be visual focus, like focusing on a spot on the wall. It can be auditory. You can be hearing a sound that'll put you into take you into trance. It might be a kinesthetic. It might be some sensation you have in your body. If you focus on it long enough, you'll go into trance. But focused attention is what takes you into trance. And so then I will ask the person, are you, and of course, I've already gotten the information from them in terms of what the issue is, what outcome they want. We've already talked about all of that prior to this. And so then I say, okay, are you ready to do some work? And if they say yes, I say, okay, well, I want you to begin by taking some deep breaths and relaxing. And I want you to focus your attention on a spot on the wall. And as you focus your attention on that spot, taking some deep breaths and beginning to relax. And then I want to build rapport with them, even though I've already built rapport with them in a sense, but I want to get them into a yes state. And so I might say to them very obvious things. I might say, you might notice the feel of your feet as they rest on the floor. You might note if there's a clock in the background that's ticking. You might notice the ticking of the clock in the background. You might notice the feel of your earring in your left ear. So I'm making statements that are obviously true, and that's how I'm building rapport. I'm saying to them, you can trust me because I'm paying attention and I know what you're experiencing. And they're not aware of experiencing those things until I call their attention to it, But when I say you can feel the pressure of your feet on the floor, that's right, And so I'm getting them into a yes state so that they will be more cooperative with me as we go along. And so I'm fixating their attention. I'm building rapport with them. And then I want to tease their conscious and their unconscious apart. And so, I might make statements like, your conscious mind is maybe wondering what's going to happen next, while your unconscious mind is very excited about the possibilities. Or I might say, your conscious mind is listening to my words, while your unconscious mind is taking you deeper into a state of relaxation and trance. So I'm teasing apart their conscious and unconscious because I'm going to work with their unconscious mind, and I don't want their conscious mind interfering. And it will, if it's not put to the side. It'll say, this isn't going to work. This is crazy. This is stupid. It'll come up with all kinds of explanations about why this isn't going to work. And so I want to kind of move it to the side so that the unconscious is paying attention to me and listening to what I say. And then I'm gonna prepare them for learning. I'm going to remind them of all the things they've learned in their lives. So I might say, when you were young, you learned how to write the ABCs, and that was very difficult. Trying to memorize all the letters, remembering how many humps the M has and where the bubble is on the B or the P. but you practiced and you learned. And once you learned how to write those ABCs, now when you pick up a pen or a pencil, you don't even think about how many humps the M has or where the bubble is on the P or the D. You just unconsciously know. Driving a car, that was difficult to learn. Before you knew how to drive a car, trying to remember how much pressure to put on the gas to go a certain speed, or how much to turn the steering wheel to go around a corner or a curve, how much pressure to put on the brake to slow down or stop. But you practiced and you learned. And now when you drive your car, you don't consciously think about how much pressure to put on the gas or how much pressure to put on the brake or how much to turn the steering wheel. You just unconsciously drive your car. And there are thousands of things that you've learned that now you do unconsciously. As a matter of fact, most of what you do in your life, you do unconsciously. Very few things do you consciously do. And so I'm preparing them for learning by reminding them of all these things they've learned in the past, some very complicated things. I mean, driving a car that's pretty complex, but they learned, and now they unconsciously do it. And so I'm reminding them of all these things they've learned. And then I might make a statement like this. I might say, and you've learned all of these things in your past, and now you do them unconsciously. And you do know, do you not, that you can learn new things? And so I'm moving them now toward learning how to resolve their problem by reminding them of all they've learned and that they're still capable of learning. So those are the elements of leading the person into trance. Now, they're not, I've gone over them as if they were steps, but they're not steps. I'm going to mix them all up. This is like a soup. I'm not going to do one and then the next one and then the next one and the next one. I'm going to mix them all up so that I might make a build-in rapport statement. You can feel the pressure of your feet on the floor, but then come right back and make a conscious, unconscious dissociation statement, and then make a learning statement. So I'm mixing them all up. So that there's just not 1, 2, 3, 4. So if that makes sense, that's the process I use of leading someone into trance. Now, is all of that necessary? No. Like I said, the only thing that's necessary is focused attention. When I ask them to focus their attention on that spot on the wall, if they focus their attention on that spot, they're going to go into trance whether I say anything else or not. So none of these things, other things, are necessary for leading a person into trance, but they are necessary for helping the person get into a state where they can take suggestions and use them to resolve their problem.
Wow. Dr. Buddy Wagner has gone over with us how he got into the business of using hypnotic intervention in his therapy and as a primary model and tool. We've talked a little bit today about how he establishes trance and how people can move into that by consent, how there's this encounter that happens, a trusting encounter always between the therapist or the healer and the person that is the recipient or the participant, however you want to see that. He talked about how he uses the power of fixation and how the person is able to fixate on particular sounds, thoughts, sights, grounding techniques. He talked about the fact that he uses these experiences as a reference to learning and how reminding us that we have learned in the past and we can learn again. Doc, as we end our time, I want you to, and you also separated work to be able to, I can't remember how you said it, but pull apart, if you can, set aside the conscious from the unconscious mind. I thought that was really well stated, sir. But let's talk about disassociation, because I use disassociation a lot in my work. I guess that's one of your imprints in my life, sir. If you don't know what that is, forgive us for doing a little shop talk here, but if you come to see me, I'm going to do a lot of disassociation work with my clients, Doc. I have for years, and I have developed my own kind of toolbox of how I get there or don't get there. As you know, there are sometimes some roadblocks and there's some readiness issues. But if you will, talk a little bit about unconscious and conscious disassociation and how the therapeutic interventive model using hypnosis as the primary tool, how that really does help the process of dissociation, sir.
Well, like I said, the idea behind initially helping the conscious and unconscious to disassociate from each other is because I want to work with the unconscious mind, and the conscious mind is very judgmental. Our conscious mind is very rigid, very judgmental, whereas our unconscious is very creative. It's open to new ideas and to change. And so I want to get that judgmental part, kind of move it to the side so that this creative part is available, because that's the part that's going to resolve the problem. And so by making those kinds of statements of the conscious mind might be doing this while the unconscious is doing
I
this,
see.
I'm just kind of teasing apart those two. Now, when I use disassociation as a therapeutic tool, because using it as I've discussed it here now, I'm really not doing therapy yet. I'm just setting the unconscious up
I see.
so that I can do the therapy. But when I use disassociation as a therapeutic tool, and as you know, because you use it, it's very effective. For example, if I'm working with a person with chronic pain, man, it makes a lot of sense for them to disassociate from that person who has the pain, or a person with a phobia, to help them disassociate from the person who has the phobia. And so, main way I use it, and I'll talk about this more when we get to the phenomena that I use. But I many times I'll use the movie as an example, and so I'll say you might find yourself sitting in a movie theater on the 8th or 10th row, and you're watching a movie, and you realize you're watching a movie of yourself. But as you sit there in your seat feeling calm and comfortable and relaxed, you realize it's the person on the screen who suffers from the phobia. And so I'm disassociating them from that person who has the phobia by using a movie as the metaphor for that. So disassociation, as I use it in hypnosis, serves two different purposes. The first one is it helps me get in touch with the unconscious and kind of get the judgmental conscious out of the way. And then when I use it as a therapeutic tool, it's helping them remove themselves from that, whatever the issue is, by watching it on a movie. There are other ways you could do it too, but watching it on a movie, for example.
His name is Dr. Buddy Wagner, and what a joy it is to have him back in my life. It's been 40 or 50 years, really, since he had the impact upon me, and yet the trail of goodness that he deposited into my own world just has led into the, I don't know, thousands of people now, Doc, that I've treated over the years in my ministry and in my practice. And so I'm grateful for you, sir. If you want to know more, send us a note. Go to saintalegius.org, saintalegius.org. Drop us a note, and we'll be glad to get more information on this and other topics to you. Till next time, he's Dr. Buddy Wagner. I'm Dr. Steve Bonenberger. This is Moments with Dr. Steve. Travel far.